Hello dear students, here we have yet another video of chapter 5 and it is going to deal with routing process. First of all, I will let you know what is routing process in computer networks. Then after we will see the classification of routing process. First one is the static routing and the second one is the dynamic routing. So let us start with the basic definition of routing. The routing is a process of creating a route for the data packets and it occurs in the network layer of the OSI model. This model, TCP/IP model, we will learn in further video lectures. There are two types of routing, static routing and dynamic routing, where static routing does not use any routing protocol. On the other hand, the dynamic routing uses the routing protocol such as RIP, IGRP, EIGRP, OSPF and I. In this video lecture, we are going to learn the difference between static routing and dynamic routing and what are the advantages and disadvantages of static and dynamic routing process. So let us start with the static routing. What is static routing? A static route is the route that the network administrator manually enters into the routing table. It is a one-way communication and here we do not use any routing protocol. That is the main important thing which is involved in static routing. How static routing works? Let's take an example. There are 5 routers connected to each other and you want to send data from router 1 to router 3 and the default route you have created in such a way that router 1 will forward the data to router 2 and the router 2 will forward this information to the router 3. The things are clear from this diagram. Just imagine a situation due to some reason if the route 2 fails, the router 1 cannot decide the alternate route for the data packets. In this scenario, the network administrator has to manually configure the alternate route so that the data will reach to the correct destination. Advantages of static routing. The route is permanent. It is more secure than dynamic routing, best suitable for a small network. Disadvantages of static routing. Not suitable for a large network. If the link gets failed, it will affect the entire network. The router cannot decide the alternate route for the network for the data packets. What is dynamic routing? The dynamic routing uses the routing protocol for creating a route for the data packets. Here the router automatically collects and stores dynamic route in the routing table. How dynamic routing works? Let's take an example that there are 5 routers connected to each other. Here the administrator is not going to create the route for the data packets. Instead of this, the administrator will assign a routing protocol to this router and this routing protocol will automatically decide the best route for each data packets. In this scenario, if any of this router or link fails, the routing protocol is so smart that it can automatically choose the alternate route for the data packets immediately, and like this it minimizes the work pressure of the network administrator and the users need to wait for the long time for the link to go. Advantages of dynamic routing. Best suitable for large networks. If the link or the router fails, it will not going to affect the entire network. routing protocols are smart to choose an alternate route for the data packets if any of the link get fails. Here the user need not to wait for long time if the link gets fails because the routing protocol immediately chosen an alternate route. Disadvantages of dynamic routing. It is less secure as compared to static routing. The route is not permanent here. It keeps changes, so the network administrator has to check regularly from where the traffic flows. The important point here to note here is every router has a routing table based on which the data packets are forwarded to the destination. Here we have the comparison table that shows the difference between the static routing and dynamic routing. The first one is the static routing. The second one in the table shows the dynamic routing. The first difference between the static and the dynamic routing is it does not use a routing protocol, but the dynamic routing it uses a routing protocol. In static routing, the administrator enters the route in the routing table manually. In dynamic routing, routing protocol decides the route for the data packets and makes an entry to the routing table automatically. The third one is static routing is suitable for a small network, and in case of dynamic routing it's suitable for large network. The fourth one is link failure affects the network. Link failure does not affect the network in case of dynamic routing. Security is very high in static routing. Dynamic routing process is less effective. In case of static routing, the route is permanent. In case of dynamic routing, the route keeps changes according to the changes in the network. That's all about the basic routing process and about static routing, dynamic routing, their advantages, disadvantages, and their comparison chart or table. So, if any queries, we are welcoming the queries. Thank you for listening and viewing this video lecture.